My name is Jorge Alvarez, and I'm the CMO of SESAMm. We're very excited for our webinar today, where we'll deep dive into generative AI and its applications to finance and risk management. As you may know, at SESAMm, we've been leveraging AI technologies for close to 10 years now, so we're not really new in the field. However, with the recent advances with generative AI technology, with ChatGPT and all that, we have seen an explosion in its application, use cases, popularity, et cetera, and we know that the implications for several industries are really, really big. So today we'll have a conversation with Sylvain Forté, who is one of the co-founders and the CEO of SESAMm. Hello, Sylvain. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, okay, thanks. You made me feel very old saying 10 years. It's been a journey.
Yeah, you were like 5 when we started. Cool. So let's start from the top. You've done quite a bit of work with generative AI, particularly in the finance sector. So to start off, can you share your thoughts on the current state of generative AI and its potential to revolutionize different sectors?
Yeah, happy to. Just a bit of context, and I'm sure everyone's aware at this stage, but we've all seen the rise of generative AI through primarily the use of ChatGPT, with large language models being leveraged in order to generate text, and that display a certain level of intelligence that we weren't necessarily expecting. As Jorge mentioned, the technology has been there for years. At SESAMm, we've been using models like BERT, for example, for quite some time, then GPT-2, then moving to GPT-3 and other applications, depending on what was available at the time. And for us, we really were quite aware of the trend, and including from the initial paper from Google, Attention All You Need, that introduced transformers and their applications. And we really followed that path of understanding how scaling these models could lead to new capabilities. And to be honest, we weren't expecting everything that happened. Like, it was very clear that large language models were allowing for natural language processing, so that field of AI that we're involved in, that is about analyzing text, to be more and more efficient. But the level of intelligence that these models started to display progressively, that was a big surprise for a lot of people, including for our team. Like, there were things that were not planned, and this is why this also created such a boom in the industry. So I think at this stage, one thing that needs to be very clear, because there's hype cycle and then people underestimate the technology and everything, is realistically systems, large language models have capabilities that are similar to humans on a lot of tasks. And that's the case for GPT-4, that's the case for Llama 2, for example, Palm, etc. And we've seen exponential development based on these capabilities increasing and based on what this was enabling. But I think it's really critical to realize that this is not the spike of the hype cycle. This is like early adoption. Up until like 2 weeks ago, GPT-4 was not available for general access. It was not only under a paywall, but also not accessible to most companies. So you had to request early access to the model. And then even with that, GPT-4 is under a hard cap in terms of budget that you can spend. So this is not like this spike of a huge hype cycle, etc., Web3 and the like. This is really, really early adoption, and these systems haven't made their way in a lot of tools that we use day to day. So at SESAMm, we have relatively high access to these models. So we use both open source ones and commercial models in production. And through our partnership with OpenAI, we're also able to leverage GPT-4 at scale, which is really helpful. But again, let's remember all that this is really, really a starting point. And I think fundamentally the great thing about generative AI is through these strange displays of intelligence that are honestly strange in these large language models, as we scale them, they understand context in a way that wasn't necessarily expected. We are starting to see a real democratizing of access to intelligence, basically. So that's really what's happening, is giving the ability for everyone to have cheap, fast, close to $0 spend intelligence available for almost any task. And it's clear that it's going to create huge productivity gains in a lot of different industries. It's clear that it's going to also redistribute the cards in the business world. We are seeing right now in our ecosystem a lot of startups emerging, enabling these use cases through their early access and starting to ramp up in terms of adoption. And I'm sure it will transform / destroy / create many jobs too. It's going to have huge economic impact, both in the right way and in the wrong way. And that's the case on all industry. Overall, I'm really optimistic because it is not a zero-sum game. And because what we're seeing right now is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of adoption. So we're seeing more value created, not a zero-sum game. And this is going to continue to accelerate and to transform many industries.
That's very interesting. I guess that for our audience, there's a particular interest in the finance sector. So can you elaborate on how you see those generative AI technologies disrupting this sector, particularly as it relates to like private equity, asset management, commercial banking? What do you see?
Yeah, sure. And on this one, I would focus specifically on text analysis and text generation, as it's our specialty. So I'm less familiar with image generation and the like. So mostly systems similar to Palm and GPT-4, etc., large language models that are aimed at deriving text. I think the primary thing that we're going to see at a high level is just higher levels of automation. So any task that is repetitive, people have attempted to automate. But now any task that is repetitive and requires intelligence is ripe for automation. And that is pretty new. And the interesting thing is that finance has a lot of these use cases. Finance is a field where there's a lot of intelligence and a lot of it is actually wasted. So when you think about middle and back office tasks involving verification, generation of documents that are to an extent quite repetitive, or even communication with clients, there is a lot of kind of wasted intelligence that could be partially or entirely automated through this system. And due to the level also of regulatory pressure and also of risk that exists in finance, this is really a place where a lot of that intelligence is not necessarily serving a creative purpose, but rather filling these needs that exist and that are specific to the field. So middle back office tasks for sure, generation of document, communicating with clients is actually one where there is a lot of discussion because a lot of institutions, organizations are afraid that the system will hallucinate in the way that it interacts. But we have to realize that for consumers, communicating with companies is actually a really bad experience right now. So there is a lot of value to be created before we go into risk territory. And I think that's the case for a lot of financial institutions that are dealing with retail customers. And for private equity is really interesting because private equity has been said to move towards the level of automation that public assets and the public, typically public equities industry has. And it has not been realized up until now because each deal is very specific. There's a lack of public information, etc., which, by the way, at SESAMm, we're helping fill through the use of AI on text data on private companies. But I think generative AI could be kind of the final transformation for private equity, where it pushes that level of automation that could not be achieved before due to the specificities and niche aspects of the industry. So it could really have a big impact. And in asset management and banking, it's going to massively drive costs down, efforts, and also providing a better service. So I think it's going to do what fintech has started to do to banking, which doesn't mean killing banks, but which means enabling more use cases and creating better services. And it's just going to go one step further.
Great, thanks so much. Now, I guess that in terms of risk management and risk mitigation strategies, how do you see this type of technology benefiting the financial sectors? Again, these particular three ones that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's true that risk mitigation is quite crucial in finance, particularly. I think that's one reason why generative AI is both so important and so controversial in this field. But I really want to focus on the potential aspect. So we discussed the ability to automate, going from coding to no code to generative AI progressively. There are a lot of applications there. There are lots of applications around analyzing documents, having a sort of augmented assistant. So these are topics and use cases that we observe. I think for risk specifically, we're going to see a lot of fraud detection use cases, prevention, things like money laundering, identity theft. So we speak to a lot of KYB teams that are using some kind of AI plus a lot of analysts in order to identify potential issues with stakeholders, companies that may be accused of tax evasion, maybe laundering money, etc. And the level of false positive right now in this field is enormous. Like it's really, really high. It's in the range of 1 to 100. So that means there's going to be human people checking 99 potential alerts for one actual alert. And with generative AI, one very simple application is just reducing that by a factor of 10 or 20 or 30 and limiting that manual labor that is required for KYC, KYB. And also, these systems are very good at matching databases. Matching databases is really a huge pain. So that's the case for anything related to identity verification and things like that. But also in private markets, it is a huge pain for a lot of people because you don't have a unique identifier like an ISIN or a FIGI that is available to all market participants. You have to either rely on local identifier like SIRET, for example, in France, SIREN, or some global ones like LEIs, but that do not apply to all companies. And so you end up with a lot of difficulties assessing the risk on one specific company. And what generative AI is very good at is cross-checking different databases and in a smart way understanding fuzzy matches so as to say, okay, this is the same person or this is the same company across different databases. And that could have a huge impact in terms of a risk mitigation. So based on this, I think there's going to be a lot of impact on risk specifically. I think there's also the other aspects. There's just summarizing documents, having the ability to analyze information faster. A good example in finance is like earning calls transcripts, where the CEO of a company is talking to analysts in public markets, and you may gather some risk insights from that, but the document is very, very long and has been analyzed for a long time using NLP. But generative AI can really help fast track that process and make that accessible to many, many people. And of course, for us at SESAMm, there's everything related to controversies. So our core field is tracking ESG controversies on public and private companies. And generative AI can help enhance that risk assessment because we can analyze more documents more quickly. We can add new risk categories. There are new risks that are emerging every day. And so whether it's an investment or a supplier that we are tracking for a specific company, I like the Signature Bank or Silicon Valley Bank example, for example, where these are both investments and suppliers for a lot of market participants. And using generative AI, you can enhance the quality of alerts that are raised, try to really detect early warnings because before these banks collapse. At SESAMm, we actually had warnings 1 month before the banks collapsed. So really at the very, very start of the bank run. And generative AI is just a huge accelerator for these use cases and helps significantly increase quality of information too. And that's important for risk. Yeah.
That's great. And, that's actually a good segue into the next topic and question. So SESAMm, again, as we were discussing, it's a company that has been using AI technologies for a long time. Can you elaborate on how SESAMm is incorporating generative AI into its processes, into its products? How do you see that playing out for next probably year or so?
Sure. Yeah. And as you can see, I'm really passionate about this, but this is also because we're very close to the topic as a team and actively embedding a lot of the technologies. So it's actually a very exciting time to be there from focusing on AI. For us, there are 3 primary ways we are integrating generative AI. So first, we just continue to embed large language models in our tech stack. So we've been doing that for several years for sentiment analysis, detecting topics, ESG controversies, etc. So the bigger the models, the better our analytics, and now we can use bigger and bigger models. So that's really one easy way. That is just a continuation of what we did before. And then there are use cases that we couldn't do before. And the typical one is we're launching a conversational agent, so basically a chatbot that is an additional layer on top of our dashboards to interact with our data. And up until now, this was not possible. Like chatbots were very poor quality. I'm sure we all have bad experiences with chatbots. But now with big models, we can actually get to very, very interesting interaction. And the objective for us here is to say, how can we make a SaaS platform easier to use? And how can we get the time of usage by a client to get the insight that they actually care about, to get the answer to their questions? How can we divide it by 10? So that's primarily what we are looking at to achieve. And the first features that we start with were, first, here's a company, find it in SESAMM's knowledge graph, identify it, even if it's the name of the company is fuzzy, even if there are multiple companies that have the same name. Give me all of the ESG controversies over the past 10 years for that company, analyze them, summarize them, and provide the relevant visualization to further dig into this information. So that's the first thing that we did. And the second thing is, in addition to that, give me a view on all of the peers that are comparables to the company and the sectors that are comparable to the company. Because we were seeing that as a really big pain in the private equity industry, where finding the right comparables is not an easy task. Like even using the SIM and investment material from the company, sometimes even the company is not aware of who their real peers are. And large language models are very, very good at doing that, as long as we give them access to a database like the SESAMM one. And the third thing is just, I think what all companies should really do is just increasing internal adoption. So beyond the fact that we're an AI company, where it's normal for us to launch AI features, we really want to incentivize teams to use generative AI as much as they can. And so that's the case for marketing, that's the case for developers, that's the case for HR, etc. And we're trying to make sure that we build templates, that we leverage this technology at scale. And we find this to be also a good way to innovate, because everyone is building knowledge around this, some that is very deep technical knowledge, like around how do we use LangChain and GPT-4 or Llama 2 in that specific environment, and some that is just business knowledge applied to large language models. So these three aspects are really critical to us: is one, continue to integrate in our own stack; two, the chatbot; and three, just continually pushing for AI adoption inside all of our teams and not just technical teams.
That sounds very, very ambitious for the company. Do you see any other implications in the next probably 1 year or two as for functionality and performance in the current products integrating this technology?
Yeah, so the first one that we saw was really around performance of the alerts, and this is actually in production. So we launched a new set of models in order to further continue to filter out false positives on controversy alerts. So the scores were already pretty high, and we were able to filter out a lot of the remaining noise that could occur when an alert is falsely detected. So our approach has always been to be really, really transparent. Our clients can access the information from the dashboard, etc. But the fewer false positives, the more time they get. So, and that was really, really a good improvement. Then continuing to work on the client interaction. There's a lot we could do in terms also of knowledge base and everything, including on our own documentation to help clients. I think this is going to revolutionize all B2B SaaS products. Like the way that we interact with large language models is going to be probably the way that we interact with business platforms in the future. So it's going to change a lot, including for SESAMM's product. And yeah, continuing to just add features, more summarization, competitive searches, and also for us reducing development time. So the more large language models are available in open source, from Falcon to Llama 2 and others, the faster go-to-market we have as an AI company, because we're not building a new foundational model from scratch. That's not our business. What we're doing is retraining, fine-tuning, and applying model to very specific, very narrow use cases where we need a lot of quality. And so this really enables us as a company to. And so, yeah, continuing to enhance controversy, ESG analysis, helping risk mitigation. And the way we approach that is we have a dedicated task force. So that's more process perspective, but we have a task force that is dedicated to that, which helped us kickstart the process, making sure that we go to market very quickly, that we launch that prototype on the chatbot, and continuous training in the team. And so now it's just day-to-day product management, like we always do, agile, sprint, etc. And we just made sure that we were able to kickstart and accelerate that process at the beginning.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sylvain. These were great insights. Now we're going to move into our Q&A session. So please, everyone for the audience, feel free to chat, to type your questions into the chat box, and we'll address as many as possible. Let me see what we have right now. We have one question here. What challenges or roadblocks do you foresee in implementing generative AI within these financial industries, and how might they be overcome?
Challenges. Yes, that's a question that we get. It makes sense. I think in the use case that I described above, like automation, augmented assistant, etc., these are really obvious right now. But there are some use cases that are not obvious right now. Like if you're thinking about things like full financial advisor that is actually managing the money for you, like think wealth management, but fully automated, and not just robo advisor, but really making decisions and optimizing things, etc. It's a bit akin to a doctor. And these use cases are a bit tough. Like if you're managing healthcare, if you're managing money in a very direct way, and if you're acting as an agent, I think we're still some way from really being able to implement these use cases at scale. There are real risks there. Data privacy is another one. So at SESAMm, we work with public data, so we don't really encounter that issue too much. But there are some use cases where there's a very strong need for leveraging internal databases with very proprietary information. So I do understand that in that case, there are limitations and a very thorough risk assessment is needed. For us, it's more about assessing the risk in terms of client information, cybersecurity, etc. But in some cases, just the data that these models need to train on is by itself highly proprietary. So yeah, I think these are risks, and maybe a last one is just resistance to change. So that's more like from an organizational and team standpoint. It's just making sure that people adapt as quickly as possible, that organizations adapt as quickly as possible. We've seen different things. We've seen clients just forbidding access to these technologies. We've seen clients experimenting very quickly in sandboxes, etc. I think it's good to find the right balance. I like the Google test, where if you share information with Google because you're typing a query in your browser, you can likely also share that information with OpenAI realistically. So it's good to really find the right strategy in terms of what's really confidential, proprietary, and critical, and what can actually accelerate innovation more than balancing the risk there. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. We have two more questions. One is more related to SESAMm. So one is, I noticed that SESAMm opened an office in Tokyo. I was wondering about SESAMm's plan for Asia, such as Hong Kong, as well as further developing the Japan market. Thank you.
Great. That's a very specific question. Less linked to generative AI, though there are some use cases there currently. So we have an office in Tokyo. We're continuing to ramp up the team. And we have a new business mostly with large asset managers and insurance companies. So these are big clients of ours. There are some that we can name that are public, like Tokyo Marine, Asset Management One, and others. And we have a head of sales APAC, Thibaut, that is managing the business. So we're going to continue to expand there. Japan is our base in APAC, so that's from where we develop. Right now, as a next step, we're continuing to develop our activities in Singapore and Korea, and Hong Kong is also on our list, but more for some travels and doing some business there, but not yet opening a subsidiary.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. This is, how do you check the veracity of data while pre-training, fine-tuning your generative AI?
Yeah, so that question is actually not just on generative AI. Actually, on generative AI, you run into this a bit less because you have less fine-tuning to do oftentimes. The models are very large, so you don't need as many examples to train them on. So the way we approach specifically for things like sentiment analysis or ESG controversy detection is we rely on a gold corpus of manual expert annotations. So we work with partners in the industry. For example, AT Finance, who is one of our partner, is an ESG rating and credit agency. And we work with them in order to compare our analytics with their manual interpretation of a controversy. And we compare that, we train, we fine tune, etc., until we reach a level that is as close as possible to human level. So that's really the process. And we always need a gold corpus. And what's interesting is that you really need to work with experts on that. So we have our own internal ESG team, led by a former Moody's person handling methodology. And then we have these partners in the industry in order to get the best data sets to train the data on and to fine-tune the analytics.
Thank you. One more question from the audience. Can you share some examples of successful projects where AI solutions made a significant impact on clients' businesses?
Yeah, I just have to think about some of the less confidential ones. So we work with various companies, and again, we cannot name all of them, but some that we name include Odo, for example, in France and in Germany, large asset manager, or Carlyle in private equity, Warburg in the US, also in private equity, and others. And there are some where the analytics are very, very critical to deal making, especially in private equity. So an example that was public a few months ago was Carlyle used our analytics in order to assess risk and competitive positioning, including ESG risk in that context, of a large company that they acquired called Yipit Data. And that was a $470 million deal, I believe, like a huge, huge deal. And this one was public, so we were able to mention it, etc. And there was a very interesting use case where we applied the different AI models in order to detect potential risk related to data, etc., understand the competitive insights on the company. But we do many, many of these. Like our clients use that for hundreds of different deals per year in order to assess risks early on in their pre-due diligence process. So prior to moving to data room access, they just type the name of the company in our dashboard and they make sure that there are no reputational or ESG risks that occur. So this one was a very public one that worked out very well. And there are many others where it's about like specific market movements, like with some large asset managers that we work with ESG teams and the like. Sometimes they get really interesting early warnings on companies like Orpea, Teleperformance, all of these controversies that you've seen recently, or Silicon Valley Bank. Sometimes our systems are just very first one to detect that something is happening, and it can help prevent large losses in the market, or it can also help make sure that the ESG ratings are updated much more quickly so that investors don't call the asset manager or private equity firm and tell them, you guys have missed something in the markets. Why don't you have a control process in place to monitor the companies? So yeah, just a few examples. And again, we can't mention all examples there. Of course, some of them are not public.
Perfect. Thanks, Sylvain. We have one more question. I think this is going to be the last one because we're going to run out of time. But How can the race for generative AI models in big corporations, OpenAI, Google Bird, and soon with Elon Musk's new company, benefit your activity? I guess for SESAMm's particular focus.
Yeah, just globally speaking, before speaking about SESAMm, as a company driven by AI and in the AI field, for us, more AI is always good. We really think that AI can solve a lot of issues that exist in the world. And for us particularly, and we published our ESG manifesto, is we think that AI is one of the solutions to fill the gaps that exist in ESG, and filling the gaps is actually a real solution to more sustainable investments. And this applies, in my view, to many industries. Like AI is a solution to a lot of issues that we have in the world. At company level, the race that is occurring is just providing us with a lot of technology. So part of the market is going commercial, closed-end API. Part of the market is going more open source. So the Meta announcements on Llama 2 are really great for the open source community, even though some of them are going commercial. But for us, it just provides us continuously with new models that we can embed in our tech stack, or commercial models that we can put on top of our data in the context of client interactions. So our go-to-market is faster. Anytime there is a new model, quality of our information continues to increase. And as we are positioned also as an expert, it values us as a company because we know how to train, apply, implement these kinds of models. And considering how quickly this is expanding, it has a lot of value for us as a company, be it from a client perspective. There are large budgets that are allocated to AI now, larger than before, or from an investor perspective, also as a VC-backed company.
Great, thank you. There's one last question. Okay, we'll do this very last one, and then we'll close up. As CEO, what do you consider to be the most significant achievements of SESAMm thus far? What milestone do you hope to achieve in the coming years?
Yeah, it's been a journey indeed. I think for us, the two ones are clients and teams. So that's in line also with what we focus on day to day. So we're very proud to work with some of the largest financial institutions in the world, to work with 7 out of the top 10 private equity firms in the world, to have happy clients using our solution in hundreds and hundreds of live deals, and on tens of thousands of companies monitored every day. So that's really huge. Like that's really huge, and we're very happy to see that trust. And the team is having been able to build a great team from a technical perspective, from a marketing perspective, with Jorge, with Leah, with everyone working with us from a sales perspective. And I think we have a very high concentration of talents, and in a fast-moving environment, that's the most important thing.
Awesome, thank you. Any other closing remarks?
No, thanks. Just really happy to have the opportunity to talk about generative AI, both at a company level and higher level. It's an amazing topic, and let us know if you'd like to discuss that further. Happy to get in touch.
Perfect. Okay, so let's wrap up. Thank you all for participating in today's webinar, and special thanks for Sylvain for his insights. So we hope this has been a valuable session for all of you. If you're interested in learning more about SESAMm, please visit sesamm.com, and you'll find a lot of resources related to this topic and to its implications in finance. And for those who would like to revisit this webinar, please be on the look on your email. We'll be sending the recording soon. Thank you once again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our future webinars. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.